The Sony NEX-F3 has a lot of really interesting things going for it. It feels like a well-designed camera, but that Sony had to intentionally cripple it in a few ways to make space for some of the other cameras in the NEX line. Regardless, this camera has a lot of potential, and my experience has been that the NEX-F3 is actually a weirdly fun camera to shoot with, even as I look at Sony's existing camera line in 2023. Welcome back, everyone. Today, as we examine the NEX-F3, we're going to take a look at some photo video samples, talk about the body design and the ergonomics, also mention a few key improvements I'd like to see out of this camera, and also figure out where this positions itself in Sony's lineup. But jumping right in, the design of this camera is certainly the most bulky design that Sony has made as far as its NEX line. The only camera that's as close in size would be the NEX-6, and I think the 6 is a little bit better designed than the F3. So the F3 might feel a little bit bulkier to some people who like the smaller, compact size of these NEX-style cameras. Personally, I think it's a welcome addition, and I like having the option to choose a camera in the NEX line that's just a little bit bigger for people with bigger hands. This camera does have a pretty solid flip screen to be able to record yourself when you're filming kind of vlog style, filming video, or if you want to take some selfies, it's pretty good for that as well. One thing I did notice is that when you try to close the screen, it's just a little bit stiffer than the rest of the NEX cameras that have a flip-up screen. Like the NEX-3N is a little bit smoother flip-up screen. This one is a little bit more stiff. I don't know if that matters to you or not, but it's just an observation. We also see a dedicated SD card slot on the bottom of the camera. This is something that we don't see in any other NEX camera besides the NEX-C3. Both of these cameras have this weird dedicated card slot, which I actually personally kind of like. It's a dedicated slot, so you don't have to open the battery door in order to access the SD card slot. Other than that, it's your pretty stereotypical NEX style camera. I've done a lot of reviews on these cameras, so you can kind of watch those to gather what the typical NEX camera kind of feels like and looks like. Okay, let's talk about sensor performance, starting with the photography side. This camera takes really good photos. I'd say it certainly is on par with the Sony NEX-3N, the 5N, and the C3. You get a 16.1 megapixel sensor, which we've seen in some of the other Sony NEX cameras. And overall, it produces great image results for photography. I really have no complaints with most of these NEX cameras as far as photo capabilities, and this camera is not an exception here. I often get asked what lens you should pair with a smaller NEX style camera like this. Most of the time the comments ask for a prime option. There really aren't a ton of prime lenses that are an affordable option and also have autofocus, but a company called TT Artisan reached out to me and wanted to send this 27mm prime lens for Sony APS-C cameras. This thing is super small. It's smaller than the 16 to 50 kit lens that you get with a lot of these Sony NEX cameras or the A6000 cameras. So it helps you maintain that small form factor that these NEX cameras are actually known for. So all of the content you see in this review about the F3 was shot with this TT Artisan lens. And my goal here is for you to understand what kind of images the F3 can produce with a budget lens. If you put a $2,000 prime lens on an $89 camera, obviously you're going to get good results because that $2,000 lens is kind of carrying the $89 sensor. But this TT Artisan lens is only $149. It has autofocus support and is a constant 2.8 aperture. The sensor in the NEX-F3 is very similar to some of the other NEX sensors, so you can tell how this TT Artisan lens would perform in those different kinds of camera bodies. So as you can see, the photos with the F3 paired with this cheaper prime lens actually look really good. Now let's shift and talk a little bit about video quality, and this is where this camera suffers a little bit. The video quality is not anywhere as bad as the NEX-C3 or the NEX-5, but the video performance is certainly not as good as some of the higher end NEX cameras like the NEX-7 and 6 and 5R, etc. So if you're specifically looking for an NEX camera that will give you the best possible video results, the F3 is not that camera, but it can provide you with okay video results if you are in a pinch and you need to use it for video. Okay, editor Craig jumping in here for just a minute. When I was looking at the footage, I was actually surprised at one of the talking head shots that you saw right before this shot you're seeing now. And it actually looked pretty good. So what I wanted to do is to bring this into my YouTube studio right now and just show you that this thing actually looks pretty decent for a YouTube style talking head setup. Now I couldn't get the autofocus to work very well with this particular lens, the TT Artisan lens, but I think it looks like a pretty good shot. I had my wife come in and manual focus so that it should be pretty tack sharp on me right now. And as you can see, like I have pretty good lighting in the studio, so the lighting is okay, which helps the image look a little bit better than it would if you had pretty bad lighting or were using like just natural overhead lights or something. So if you have good lighting, and I'm currently shooting at only 400 ISO at this with this 2.8 lens. So I think this is usable. It's passable. If you really are in a pinch and you need 1080p video at 24 frames a second, this could be a viable option. Overall, I would say if you can find this camera at an affordable price point, the photo quality is going to be incredible and the video quality will be just okay. With the F3, you're gonna get that same menu system that all the other NEX cameras have. This is a much older Sony menu system that I am personally not very fond of, but it's okay. You obviously can use it to change your settings and navigate the menu. This camera also does not feature a dedicated ISO button, so I find myself having to dive into the menu, into the color and brightness setting to change the ISO. It's really clunky and slow. I don't like that. I like having the ability to switch my ISO really quickly, especially when I'm shooting in outdoor environments. ISO is something I'm always changing, as well as my shutter speed. Thankfully, you can change your shutter speed and aperture pretty quickly, but you can't change your ISO very fast. So at the end of the day, as I look at the NEX-3 camera lineup, here I have the 3N, the F3, and the C3. I'd probably purchase them in this order. So starting with the 3N, I think this is a great camera. It has just a lot going for it, and I'd prefer this over the F3. Then I would purchase the F3 if I couldn't find a 3N. And if all else failed, I would purchase a C3. And the NEX-3 is not a super common camera to find. I'd probably put the C3 and the 3 in the exact same category. It's basically the same camera, just a different colorway. So overall, the F3 is just a weirdly fun camera to use. I like that it's a little bit bulkier. It pairs really well with like this TT Artisan lens, which I'll link down in the description below. So if you're looking for an NEX camera and you're having a hard time finding them and you're trying to grab like a 5N or an NEX-6 or something, I would say that the F3 is actually a pretty good option. And if you can't find another one and you have to settle on the F3, there are a few trade-offs there, but overall the photo quality is going to match most of the other NEX cameras and you can't really go wrong with the F3. Video quality suffers a little bit, but you're gonna get great photos. Thank you guys so much for taking time to watch this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks so much guys. I'll see you in the next video. Much love.